Good morning. I'm Frances Shannon. I'm Acting Vice-Chancellor of the University of Canberra at the moment, standing in for Professor Deep Saini. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Frances.
Good to be with you again. Another interesting week in politics, especially for the Liberals. Some of Tony Abbott's own colleagues have slammed him over a leaked recording in which he again referred to the budget as second best and spoke openly about a crisis in the coalition. What do you think is his end game in this?
I think he's got a few games. I think one is that he really thinks Malcolm Turnbull's doing a bad job and that he shouldn't be leader. Now, he doesn't necessarily think Tony Abbott, can regain that post, even though he'd obviously like to, but I do think he wants to see the end of Malcolm Turnbull. I think also at the moment he is pursuing strongly the cause of reform in the New South Wales Liberal Party. This comes to a head in a couple of weeks at a convention of the party in that state. He wants a more democratic structure, so he's out canvassing internal party change. Also, he sees himself as something of the conscience of the Liberal Party, the standard bearer of the Conservatives in that party, and therefore he's articulating a conservative agenda, which is also an alternative set of policies for the government.
Obviously quite a complex set of interactions then. Is there any way that this internal conflict can be brought to an end or at least eased?
I don't think there is an obvious way. The colleagues have tried ignoring him in earlier times and just saying, oh, well, a backbencher has a right to say what he likes, and especially if he's a former Prime Minister, but that didn't work. Now they've come back and criticised him for speaking out. Josh Frydenberg said this week that it just helped Bill Shorten. Others have said, well, he's contradicted previous policy positions he's held, but I don't think that we'll see any end to this in the short term. It may be that it's particularly intense in this period leading up to the party convention, that he really wants to be out there on those internal issues. Whether we see some scaling back after that remains to be seen, but on the whole, he sees himself as having a prominent role in the party and he wants to preserve his voice.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out then. Also this week, the phased reduction to penalty rates in the hospitality, fast food, retail and so on industries has begun, and it's got a lot of attention in the media. Will this turn into a big election issue?
I think it probably will. It's an issue that does suit Bill Shorten because with his union background, he's very easy with these sorts of industrial issues. He speaks well at rallies, he interacts well when he visits workplaces, and he's got a very clear policy, and that is that in government, Labor would reverse this decision. It would also stop the Fair Work Commission, which of course made the decision, not the government. The Fair Work Commission doing anything in future to cut penalty rates. So it's something that will, I think, resonate with a lot of people, obviously with those who find their wages cut back or fear that they will be in future. It's something that's phased in, so it's not as though it's suddenly over. The cuts looming in the future as well as the cut that's been okayed for now, and it's the sort of issue that is really ripe for a scare campaign for Labor, because it can say, well, okay, it's just in these 4 industries at the moment or sectors at the moment, but it could be extended later.
What about the rhetoric that it will create more jobs, it will allow cafes and the like to put on more staff?
Some experts contest that, but also the thing is that if you're a worker affected, then you know that this decision is costing you money. If you're someone who gets a job later, you're not particularly relating it back to this decision because a number of factors there in employment growth. So it's a case of a very direct hit versus a strung out and limited benefit, and one that, as I say, is contested by some experts.
So Malcolm Turnbull has left all of this activity behind now and is in Hamburg at the G20. What will he be focusing on during that meeting?
Some issues that he wants to take up include the need to resist the spread of protectionism and the protectionist forces that we've seen growing internationally. Australia has very strong interest in preserving free or freer trade, maximum free trade. Another issue that he's been talking up a great deal recently is the need to try to ensure that the internet is not used for terrorist purposes. And this goes to whether there should be access to encrypted data on the internet, and in general, what sort of controls should be placed on it, what are the responsibilities of the big internet companies to play their part in the fight against terrorism. And of course, issues that come up here are very much privacy issues, as well as the responsibility and the rights of these big companies. How much attention an issue like that will get will partly be, I think, dependent on whether the Korean crisis really absolutely pushes out or limits the discussion of other issues, but one would think it would get some attention.
Speaking of the Korean issue, confirmation that North Korea tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile this week has brought the reality of that country's threat into sharper focus, and there's been a lot of discussion about it. What are the specific implications, if any, for Australia?
Clearly, it's a major, major diplomatic crisis at the moment, and there's a big imperative for the great powers to try to contain this. So the emphasis will be on President Trump and on America's stand, how sort of forthright he intends to be, and also, of course, on China. So they will be the major players over the G20 weekend. In terms of Australia, well, obviously, if this crisis blew into something even more serious, then that would have massive implications for the whole world. I think that at the moment what it's doing is adding instability to the whole regional outlook, and that of course does have flow-on implications for Australia. Now, our military has been talking down the danger of Australia being hit by any North Korean attack by its missiles. They're saying, well, this is still at the very early stage or relatively early stage of development of this missile capacity, and there's no immediate danger, and Australia wouldn't particularly be targeted anyway. But the thing is that this is an evolving situation which has got progressively worse, and unless contained by some diplomatic actions and agreements, more sanctions and so on, and the North Korean regime becoming more responsive to the international pressures, it'll only intensify.
Well, it's been another interesting week, both nationally and internationally in politics. Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. Good to talk with you again.